This video is brought to you by Straight Goods News, Canada's alternative online news source. Visit straightgoods.ca.
You also probably know, I think we've circulated the fact that there's an open letter that signed by 8 scientists from across the country on this very issue, that's to the Prime Minister and the ministers involved, that's been released, and there are press conferences being held in Vancouver and Edmonton, in Montreal as well. We're doing something today in support of that. So let me start. 3 weeks ago, it was announced the Conservative government will end funding to the experimental lakes area effective March 2013 because it no longer fits within the government's mandate. So today, my NDP colleagues and I, together with scientists from across Canada, are calling on this Conservative government to reconsider its decision to close the ELA and recognize the importance of the program to the government's mandate to study, preserve, and protect aquatic ecosystems. The experimental lakes has provided 4 decades of groundbreaking scientific knowledge on aquatic ecosystems. ELA researchers have studied everything from the effects of newly constructed reservoirs on greenhouse gas emissions to the effects of atmospheric mercury or mercury levels in fish. And this summer's research was slated to begin on the effects of nanoparticles, an emerging multi-billion-dollar technology on waterways and fish. This vital research is now on hold until the future of the ELO has been determined. So scientists from around the world are condemning the move of this government. Canada has been at the forefront of freshwater research, and we have the richest data on freshwater in the world. But Canada can only continue to be a world leader in this area if the Conservatives agree to reverse their decision and recommit funding to the ELA. The Conservatives' complete disregard for science and facts is now well known, and this closure is just one of many faced not only within the Department of Fisheries and Oceans, which has received the brunt of the cuts to science, but across Canadian agencies. Over the past weeks, Conservatives have also cut funding to other key science programs and positions, including the Ocean Pollution Monitoring Program and Canada's lead oil spill expert at the Centre for Offshore Oil, Gas and Energy Research. These decisions represent death by 1,000 cuts to our scientific community. Canada is a 3-coast nation. We have the largest coastline in the world, but under this government, we will no longer have the scientific capacity to understand our waterways. This, frankly, is a disgrace. Today in the House of Commons, we are debating an earlier introduced motion by the NDP calling on the government to stop muzzling scientists and to reverse cuts to scientific programs and research programs across Canada. We understand that sound environmental policy can only be made when proper research has been done. So we're calling on the government and the other opposition parties to support our motion and to put science back in the forefront of public policy.
And happy World Environment Day, everyone. As you heard from Anne just a moment ago, this really is an attack on science. It's an attack on evidence. It's an attack on all the tools that we need to create good public policy. I just wanted to quickly share with you an anecdote that we heard at the Finance Subcommittee hearings recently about the experimental lakes area. Dr. David Schindler was there, and he talked about a test that they were doing around acid rain with the ELA. And he said that acid rain, you know, they were looking at how this was impacting the lakes, and it wasn't really having an effect on fish. So it wasn't really killing the fish. But you know what? It killed their food supply. And he said the scenario that came next was that these fish would starve to death. That's the kind of important work that ELA is doing. That's the kind of evidence we need to make sound policy decisions. That's the kind of science that we need. And I'm left wondering, is this the kind of Canada we want? A Canada where policy is not based on science and not based on evidence? And I'll pass it on to Mr. Martin.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Megan, and thank you for this opportunity to be here. Many of the scientists that work at the Freshwater Institute and the Experimental Lakes area live in my riding and have made representation to me. I can only conclude the decision to cut the funding to the Experimental Lakes area is almost incomprehensibly stupid. It's not only an affront to the international scientific community that is seized of the issue of preserving perhaps our most precious natural resource, water, but there's no business case for it. Megan already cited one clear example. This is a case of penny wise, pound foolish in the most egregious way, in that this ELA has paid for itself over and over and over again. One example from Megan, I'll give you another quick example. The study of phosphates and nitrogen pollution into Great Lakes such as Lake Winnipeg and the Baltic Sea were being studied. The cost of eliminating both for Lake Winnipeg alone would have been about $400 million to reduce. It was learned by experimentation and through the ELA that eliminating the phosphates, yes, critically important. If you eliminate the nitrates at the same time, it may actually compound the algae growth problem. So the price tag was reduced from $400 million to $100 million. And the scientists in the Baltic Sea replicated this same evidence in their efforts to remediate the damage to that great body of water. There's example after example after example where this $2 million a year has yielded great benefit. And the final thing I will say, that to prove there is no business case for eliminating this funding, is that right within the incorporation acts of this institute is the obligation that if it is ever shut down, those 58 lakes must be completely remediated back to their original state. The cost of that remediation far, far, far exceeds the operating costs of this invaluable organization. So it's an example where the conservatives seem to view science as the enemy, shoot the messenger, pave the way for unlimited laissez-faire development, and we don't want any messages to the contrary that may stand in the way of industrial progress. It's bizarre, it's unimaginable in this day and age, and it's an international embarrassment, as cited by these 8 scientists from around the world who are pleading for some reason and logic to get into this debate. Thank you. I'll give it back to Robert.
Great, thanks very much. It's un-Canadian.
Un-Canadian.
Questions?
Can we just ask Pat Martin, if some of these people actually work in your riding, is that what you said?
Yes, the Freshwater Institute, the ELA reports to and works through the Freshwater Institute, which is a world-renowned institute in Winnipeg. The ELA is just across the border, these 58 lakes in Ontario, but the scientists, 17 or 18 scientists that work in that area, report to and operate out of the Freshwater Institute.
So is it your understanding, like I gather you've spoken to some of them, they can talk to you kind of off the record, but...
No, they're not allowed to talk at all. We're speaking for them. They've been muzzled. They've been muzzled. The spouse of one of these scientists has taken it on herself to blow the whistle on this. I think the government is, they're probably surprised at the amount of international pushback because they very carefully muzzled these scientists so they couldn't complain about having their throat cut and the rug pulled out from underneath them.
Scientists who work with them are speaking up because they recognize the science and the importance of it.
In what way were they muzzled? Were they threatened you'll lose your job, or do you know in what way they were muzzled?
Well, they were told that they were not allowed to comment. I mean, obviously, if the scientists, career scientists with the federal government are cut from the experimental lakes area, I suppose many may hope that they be reposted elsewhere within the federal civil service. But they weren't allowed to speak up. Their international colleagues have to speak for them. Their spouses have to speak for them. Their members of parliament have to speak for them because the government has muzzled those scientists from drawing the world's attention to this ridiculous, idiotic scheme to kill their program.
The government has talked about shifting its resources to the west and improving monitoring of the oil sands. Is this at all possible that any of these scientists could resurface doing work in Alberta in terms of improving monitoring there?
Well, I mean, who knows? What we've seen over the past number of weeks with this attack on science, attack on the environment from this government, is they have things now in a complete and utter state of confusion and chaos right across the country. Whether it's in, the minister was in Dartmouth yesterday, the Minister of Fisheries was in Dartmouth yesterday, and he heard from a lot of folks in that community that recognize the importance of the DFO scientists, of the Coast Guard, of search and rescue, and people were pushing back hard on the way they've backed off, supporting science in the fishery and supporting environmental assessments, supporting the restoration of salmon in our rivers in Nova Scotia. This is happening across the country. So part of the problem is we don't know how this is all going to spin out. What we're trying to do and what other advocates across the country are trying to do is put a stop to it, is to encourage the government to recognize the damage that's being created, the long-lasting damage that's being created as a result of shutting down programs like this, and to reconsider, to take a pause, hit the reset button, and recognize that they need to come at this again a different way.
How much does the government save by closing down this centre? Is this a money-saving thing or something else?
Well, it's less than $2 million, so frankly, it's peanuts. I mean, that's one day's visit for one of the second-string B-class Royals. But so I don't think money-saving is the issue here. I think silencing scientists is the issue. I was wondering if our Representative Ann Quash could comment, respond to your question, Julie.
Yeah, but can I just ask you before you go away from the mic, $2 million is not a lot of money.
Less than $2 million.
How can this centre do so much for $2 million?
I tell you, this is the best value in the scientific research today. For $2 million a year, we're doing world-class, unique research.
They have the infrastructure.
They've had the infrastructure and the data that all goes out the window. But there's nowhere else in the world you can find 58 pristine lakes. This research has to be done in test tubes and laboratories. We have the natural setting where you can do, peer-tested research in that way. It's a bargain. So this isn't about money. This is about muzzling
scientists. The budget bill is 430 pages long. So each day we find a new piece like this that's hidden somewhere in the dark recesses of this bill. I can say that we are firmly opposed to shutting down the ELA. Like Mr. Martin explained, it's incredible value for money. This is such, the implications of its closure are so new to us that I don't think we've done a full analysis about where we would go in the future with it. But for right now, we just want to send the message to Stephen Harper that it has to stay open. Come on, it's $2 million.
What is your impression about why the government would want to close it if it's not costing a lot of money? What do you actually think is the reason?
Let's look at this budget as a whole. Everything in this budget is an attack on anything that can get in the way of the government agenda, oil and gas development, of development at any cost, resource development at any cost, whether it's shutting down the ELA, whether it's getting rid of science through cuts to Environment Canada or getting rid of evidence through closing the National Roundtable, whether it's going after people who dissent and finding $8 million to go after charities. Everything in this budget is about that one track of resource development at any cost. When think about 5 years ago, would we have had a budget that had zero money for energy efficiency that creates jobs in every community in Canada? Would we have had a budget that has zero money for renewables? 5 years ago, we wouldn't have recognized this budget.
But how does this centre have anything to do with oil and gas when we've talked about acid rain and phosphates?
It's all about evidence. We don't want evidence that industrial outputs could possibly have harm to environment. We don't want that. Sorry, when I say we, I should rephrase. They don't want that evidence. The government doesn't want evidence that their resource development projects might have a negative impact on environment, plain and simple.
And they can also do research on the impact that has on freshwater.
Through a clause in the budget or through cuts in Environment Canada that are causing less money to go around?
It is through cuts. I'll actually let Mr. Chisholm answer that.
Yeah, no, it's through cuts that were announced through
Pat
DFO.
Martin, a quick question.
Yep.
The people that are being muzzled there, do they all lose their jobs? And if that's the case, why are they worried about speaking out, or do they get put somewhere else, or do you know?
Well, this is the thing, is that many of the people who get their pink slips or their notices, essentially, of pending layoffs are optimistic and hopeful that they will be replaced in other positions within the federal government. So if you do get a muzzling order or a directive that you're not allowed to speak in public about this layoff, I suppose you could be disciplined and jeopardize your chances of being replaced or placed elsewhere in the civil service. Let me make one point that I forgot to make. If you read carefully the government statements about shutting down the ELA, they say it will be closed down in April, even though a new 5-year agreement was only signed in 2010. It will be closed down in April if we can't find somebody else to run the program. I mean, who are they talking to? Dow Chemical or United Carbide? Monsanto? I mean, are they trying to farm out the research so that it's not as independent as research done by Government of Canada researchers? That's a huge concern for those involved. I mean, no university can afford to pick this up. So who would it be? The private sector? The Canadian Association of Petroleum Producers? I don't know.
Research stations of this similarity, or this is usually often, almost all the time, a federal?
Well, this is a
field?
tripartite deal through Department of the Environment, Department of Fisheries and Oceans, and the Province of Ontario, and tangentially the Freshwater Institute. But the three signatories, I have the documentation here, the three signatories are the Province of Ontario, the Director of Research for DFO, and the Director of Research for the Department of the Environment. So there is a provincial involvement, but not funding. I don't think it should fall to any of the provinces, frankly, to do this kind of national research.
Can I ask one last question? Why do you think the government and key ministers, including the Prime Minister and so on, why do you think they don't understand science? Because you bring it up a lot.
Why do I think key ministers don't understand science?
The underlying theme here.
Yeah, I think they don't understand science, but maybe more importantly, I think that they don't want to. I think it's willful blindness because science gets in the way. It gets in the way of what they want to do. Think about the oil sands water monitoring program that they announced, which implicitly says that we haven't been doing proper monitoring, first of all. When's that research going to come out? After the next election. Science gets in the way. It gets in the way of their politics.
I mean, let's be clear. I mean, it's not as if the members opposite are not intelligent people, but when they've shown that when they get evidence that is contrary to what it is they want to do, then they ignore it or they get rid of it. National Roundtable on the Environment and the Economy, gone. National Council on Welfare, gone. Science across the country in so many different agencies, gone. It's not that the ministers are stupid. It's that they don't agree with it and they don't want to have dissenting voices. They don't want to have scientists in the bureaucracy or across. They don't. I mean, they're trying to shut down debate in the House of Commons. They don't want MPs to be making a fuss and bringing out the concerns about this. That's what we're faced with, and that's what Canadians are recognizing increasingly.